back. They hit a game winner.
I know, I seen that. You play baseball?
Exactly, bro. What did I say?
You're a varsity? Up and comer here. Side of the MLB. Yeah.
You got one in your shoe. All right, this is going to be a disaster because I gotta talk. I gotta talk in my Godfather voice. Lenny, you disgraced the family. No, nobody's ever seen the Godfather. I sound exactly like Mom and Brenda. Hopefully you won't find a severed horse's head in your bed. That's a sign that the mafia is after you. Okay, so I have probably beaten a dead horse with all the forms and the head puzzles that you've had to do lately while this voice has been kind of barely talked at all, cahoots and all that. So I'm going to try today to make it through this. I'm actually recording this right now, just in case my voice totally fails, and so my students can have something later. Yeah, okay? In any case, here's the deal. I've got to explain civil rights to you over the next 4 days. At some point, either next Thursday or Friday, there'll be a Cold War and civil rights test. And for the most part, I think that'll be the last test that we'll have before the course exam. We'll still be learning, but I may not test you on things. But this is stuff so important that I've got to make sure that there's some kind of accountability. So what I'd like to do is go for civil rights. When I go through civil rights, I'd like to go by president. Eisenhower first, that's today. Then JFK tomorrow. LBJ on Monday. Civil rights spinoffs probably Tuesday, Wednesday. So that's where we're going with this. Here we go, I guess. I'll go ahead and start. What I want to make sure that you understand is that the civil rights movement unofficially starts in 1954. I found this stuff over my chair. 1954 with the Brown versus Board of Education decision. But what these first couple slides are going to be doing is they're going to be showing you that there were things that were done before. And I'm going to kind of go through these fast because there are other things that are more important. But I want to make sure that you understand that of the 3 branches, legislative, executive, judicial, it was the judicial branch that ended up being more aggressive at first when it comes to civil rights. That presidents like FDR, like Eisenhower, weren't as aggressive, didn't care as much about civil rights as maybe the Supreme Court did. It certainly wasn't Congress. No. The first Supreme Court justice I want to talk about is Fred Vinson. He is the Supreme Court Chief Justice that actually lays the groundwork for 1954 and after. As you'll see, he outlaws the whole white primary. All right. Let me ask you, do you know what about primary election is? You should, because you had government last semester. Do you know what a primary election is? Okay, there's two elections. There's a primary, and it comes first because that's what primary means. And then there is a general election. So let me write this out, especially for the people at home. Let's make it black. Okay. So the primary election and the general election. This usually happens in the spring. This usually happens in November, in the fall. We have a primary election coming up here in May for candidates for governor. So what this means is you have a Republican primary, you have a Democratic primary. All of the candidates for governor that are Republican are going to be on the ballot. So let's say there's 3. And if you're Republican, you go into the ballot box and you tell them, I am a Republican. And then they give you a ticket. And then you go in and cast your vote. You want number 3 to be the candidate for governor. And then let's say there's 2 Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you go in, they give you a Democratic ballot, and you go in there and you vote for the person. And what the primary does is it helps you send the candidate to the general election, and then these 2 fight it out in the general election. Does that make sense? You good with that? In other words, it was true that before the Supreme Court outlawed the white primary, if you wanted to vote here, you had to be white. You couldn't be black. And Fred Vinson helps outlaw that. I can't wait till we get new TV screens next year. That's going to be great. Okay. You might remember Plessy versus Ferguson. That said separate but equal. Supreme Court cases before this had been very much focusing on the separate part. We're going to keep blacks separate from whites. What Fred Vinson does is he starts focusing on the equal part of that, more literally. And here's a picture of Fred Vinson. Now, I want you to notice that I'm giving him an Ohio State sticker. What does that mean? Good guess, but actually he's from Kentucky. I am going to give you my opinion throughout this. If I give somebody an Ohio State sticker, that means I think that they're awesome, brave, courageous, because Ohio State is awesome and brave and courageous. If I give them a Michigan sticker, then that means I think they suck. Okay, fair enough? Fair enough? Everybody? Good? Okay. You can say, Mr. Beavers, I don't want to hear your opinion. Well, you're going to hear it anyway. And by the way, if you don't like, how many of you like Michigan? How many are Michigan fans? Okay, sorry. You're going to have to feel discriminated against this entire class time because I'm going to use your favorite school as a thing of utter disdain and contempt. Okay. I give him because he tried to help civil rights out. Now, I'm going to go through this real quick. I'm going to try to give you just examples of how he starts chipping away at separate but equal. But where it first starts to happen is not in elementary schools, and not in high schools, not even in colleges. It's if you graduate college and then go to law school, or if you graduate college and then go to medical school or something like that. That's where they started with desegregating. So Missouri versus Canada being the last name of somebody not being a country. The state of Missouri refused to admit a black student to law school. There was an all-white law school in Missouri, in the state of Missouri, that was run by the state government. And separate but equal says, well, there has to be a black school, right? What Missouri said is, sorry, we don't have a black school. What we'll do is we'll pay for you to go out of state. And doesn't that seem unfair? That you have to leave the state if you're African American if you wanted to study to be a lawyer. And so this Supreme Court case said that's unconstitutional. Because if the state of Missouri doesn't have a separate black facility, then you have to let it into the white facility. If you can't make them separate, then let's make them equal by letting them go to the all-white school. Notice they are not saying separate but equal is wrong yet. They're not challenging the notion of separate but equal. They're just trying to enforce the equal side of the separate. Smith versus Albright was the one that got rid of the all-white primaries. Morgan versus Virginia outlawed segregation on interstate buses. If the bus crosses state lines while you're traveling, then Congress has the right to say that there's no segregation allowed on there. Smith versus Painter said there is a separate black law school in the state, but it is not equal in quality to the white one. And so therefore, that's unconstitutional. What you're going to have to do is either make the black school better or let the black students go to the white school. And then in McLaurin versus Oklahoma State Regents, if you are a graduate school that has admitted a black student, you can't then segregate them and make them go to separate classes with everybody else. If you've admitted them, then they have to be able to participate with the rest of the students, regardless of the color of their skin. Think all the way back to the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment says that equal protection, that all of us citizens deserve equal protection under the law. And so this is interpreting that very literally. Let's try to make it as equal as possible. But I want you to understand, you do not have to go back and make blue cards of all these and say, I've got to know these 5 rulings like the back of my hand. What I'm trying to say is that they're laying the groundwork in graduate schools, but they're not yet saying everybody was wrong. Got me? Good. Okay. So one example of those, Morgan versus Virginia. Irene Morgan had to sit in the black part of an interstate bus. She said that's not right, because there's a law on the books way back in the 1800s that said you can't segregate on interstate transportation. She sued. She got the NAACP to help her. Do you remember what NAACP stands for? Anybody remember this? NAACP. It still exists today. Anybody remember what this stands for? National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. It's still around today. What it does is it gives money to black students who want to go to college. It also has a legal defense fund when it can help protect people in court from discrimination. She got the NAACP to help her. The lawyer that helped her was a Thurgood Marshall. And he got Morgan versus Virginia, with the desegregating the interstate buses. There's a reason why I'm showing you him, though, because he's an important person in history. Does anybody know why you should know him? Let me give you a clue. He's the first something. Yeah. Good guess. He's not the first black lawyer, but think higher up in the court system. He's the first black Supreme Court judge. Put it there by LBJ. So yeah, we're on the right track. Good job. I give them both high state stickers because that takes some guts to take on an entire system of racism. Okay, now here's where we're getting into the stuff that is really important. Not just background. Here we're getting into the meat, the things that I would ask you to remember from the course of today. In 1953, Dwight Eisenhower, he takes office as president, and he has the opportunity to appoint a new Chief Justice. Frank Vincent retires, and so Eisenhower, being a Republican, picks somebody who he thinks is going to be conservative. He picks Republican Governor of California, Earl Warren, to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And Earl Warren did a lot of great things. He had awesome civil rights Supreme Court cases, like the one we're going to look at next. But he also disappointed conservatives because he allowed some other things to happen that conservatives didn't like allowing people accused of crimes and criminals to have a little bit more leeway in the justice system. Now, what do you know of me? Do I lean more liberal or do I lean more conservative? Do you know that somebody from Mrs. Lombardo's class, maybe it was you, maybe it was you, maybe it was you, I don't know, told Miss Lombardo that I am a liberal? They told her that I am like bordering on socialist. Me. Have I given you that vibe this year? That I want to go around and throw Molotov cocktails at government officials? I haven't given you, I hope not. I'm about as, I don't know, what do you call it? Normie? Is that what you call people like me? Normies? Right? So, what I'm trying to say is that when I'm giving you my opinion on Earl Warren, there's some really good things about him that I liked. And there's some things about him, like his rulings on religion, that I didn't like. So I can't give him an Ohio State sticker, and I can't give him a Michigan sticker, because he's not all good, he's not all bad. So I chose to give him an Indiana sticker. Because let's be honest, nobody really hates Indiana. Nobody loves Indiana. Nobody hates Indiana. You either love or hate Ohio State, you either love or hate Michigan. Nobody really hates Indiana, so I give him that. He's kind of anyway, what does he do? One of his first big cases is Brown versus Board of Education. It's also called, the long name of it is Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. There's a little girl who had a white school, like literally 5 blocks from her house or something like that. This black girl had to walk to school across railroad tracks and through dangerous parts of the city, like 2 miles to get to the all-black school. And so the parents sued. They said, listen, all right. And Earl Warren took the case, and they ruled separate facilities for blacks and whites is inherently unequal. This is the first time since Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 where somebody has had the guts to say it's wrong to segregate people. And think about that just for a second. Does it make any sense that they look at a person's color of their skin and say, you need to go over there because of that shade of skin tone? Does that make any sense at all? It doesn't make any sense, right? And what if you're if skin tone matters, right? Then there's like 90% of the world would be like over there, right? Because let's be honest, white is across the world the minority, right? There's nothing about a person's character that's reflected in their skin color. There's nothing about a person's intelligence that's reflected in their skin color. like me saying, Max has to sit in the back because he has brown hair. And what sense does that make? You have to sit in the back because you have brown eyes. Sorry, then what sense does that make? Right? I mean, it's totally arbitrary. It means nothing. What does the word inherently mean? I had you write it down, but do you know what it means? Not inherited, inherently. Good guess, though. It means by its very nature it's wrong. It always has been wrong. It always will be wrong. Before they said, as long as the two schools are equal in quality, then they can be separate. But they're saying even if it is equal in quality, separating it by its very nature is discriminatory. Okay, you got me so far? You following me? Okay. So, we're not talking about graduate schools anymore. We're talking about high schools, middle schools, elementary schools. Segregation in public education violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. It is not equal protection. I want to emphasize the fact that this is a unanimous decision. Whenever you have controversial cases like this, it's almost always 5-4. The 5 conservatives on the court versus the 4 liberals on the court, or the 5 liberals on the court versus the 4 conservatives. It always is almost split down the middle. This one, the liberals and conservatives agreed. This is wrong. All 9 of them voted. Overturning the precedent that Plessy versus Ferguson. Look, I would not be surprised. I would ask you to not be surprised if you get in a course exam question that says something like, what was the ruling of the Plessy versus Ferguson case? And you'll say something like separate but equal. Or if you get something about Brown versus Ford and you'll say it's separate but equal is unconstitutional. I just wouldn't be surprised. It happens every year. Now the court recognized that we have to have time to adapt because it's not like overnight. The Supreme Court says this is wrong, and then everybody's like magically, oh yeah, the Supreme Court's right. That's not how it works. The Supreme Court doesn't take away people's free will and their years of upbringing of racial prejudice, right? And so there will be a Brown 2 3 years later that'll say, let's start to hurry it up a little bit. We can be deliberate about it, but we need to pick up the speed a little bit. Now, when I'm showing you this, here's the point I'm trying to show you. Thurgood Marshall and the other NAACP lawyers did something very, very powerful in this court case. They brought in research from actual people. One of the things they did was they had these little black children. They gave them the option. You can play with this doll or you can play with that doll. And one of the dolls was black and one of the dolls was white. And guess what? Like 70% or more of these black kids chose. Guess which doll they chose to play with? The white one. Why? They've been taught that their skin color is inferior and this white skin color is superior, and so they're going to play. Little kids want to play with the best toy. They chose what they considered was the best doll. They have been taught by society over time in their young lives that white is better. This was a very striking thing to show the Supreme Court justices. It broke their hearts, I think. That's why the 9-0 decision, that this is wrong, that you should be able to choose a doll that looks like you, right? And it's not inferior. Now, again, you can't undo an entire lifetime of racial prejudice and discrimination. And sometimes it's true that you might be the only black kid in an entire class of white kids. Look at this on the first day of desegregation in this school in Virginia. This girl, this African-American child has been set in the front, and she's with, I don't see any other black kids, do you? How do you think this girl right here, this white girl, is treating her? Doesn't look like she's being very welcoming. And look at her face. She's got that. What do you call that? Snotty. I mean, for heaven's sake. Now, I give this little white girl the Michigan sticker. Upside down Michigan sticker. Sorry. I don't really want to give her the Michigan sticker. Because is it really her fault, this young, 5-year-old child, that she's been taught these racial prejudices all of her life? That's not really her fault, right? So really what I'm giving the Michigan sticker to is the culture of society that was teaching these kind of things to her that she would buy into. But I don't give the adults any leeway. I know they've been taught this all their life, but they're adults, right? And look what they're saying. Race mixing is communism. Stop the race mixing. Stop the race mixing. Stop integration. Integration is illegal. I mean, these people are resisting this big time. These kids, and that's what, maybe these kids right here, these high schoolers, aren't being mean to him, but they're not welcoming him, right? He's off by himself. Right? The situation wasn't perfect just because the Supreme Court declared it so. And I get this whole situation in Michigan State. Now, President Eisenhower, said privately that the Supreme Court case, Brown versus Board, was a bad case. He said, publicly, I don't believe you can change the hearts of men with laws or decisions. And I agree with Eisenhower here. The Supreme Court saying something doesn't change a person's heart, doesn't change 40 years of racial prejudice being taught to a person. It just doesn't happen. Here's where I would disagree with Eisenhower, though. If not now, when? When is society going to be ready? You're saying don't do it because society isn't ready. But I don't think that that's a good enough excuse, because if you do that, society will never be ready. I mean, for heaven's sake, just let me give you an example. You might say, I'm not going to have a kid until I'm ready. I'm not going to have any kids until I have enough money and all that kind of stuff. Let me tell you something. After you're married, of course, you will never be ready to have a kid. You'll never have enough money to have a kid. So you might as well just have kids when you're young and you have enough energy. Because if you wait till you're 33 to have your kids, my 2-year-old is going to be, when she graduates, I'll be 59 years old. I'll be ancient. You'll never be ready. Society will never be ready. Right? So just do the right thing. Now, he is a military man. He does believe in military following orders. Even if you don't like the order, if you're given an order in the military, you follow it. And so he feels like the Supreme Court's given him an order, and whether he likes it or not, he's going to follow the order. And so he follows the order. He desegregates the schools of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a federal district. It's not owned or governed by any state. And so he has the power to issue an executive order to desegregate the schools, and he does. He does what he's supposed to do. Now that's Washington, D.C. What if a state refuses? Is Eisenhower going to say, okay, sorry, you can't do it, it's a state, or is he going to, make them follow orders too? And that's what the next thing is about. Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock is the capital of Arkansas. It's their biggest city. In 1957, there was an order that came down to desegregate Little Rock's Central High School. The governor of Arkansas, the governor of Arkansas was named Orville Faubus. Orville Faubus. What an awful name. He He sounds like a bad man, but it doesn't. Thomas. He was a very racially prejudiced dude. He was a Southern Democrat. Every governor has the National Guard at their disposal, and so he uses the National Guard to keep black students out of Central High School in Little Rock. Can you imagine that? Having soldiers with guns and bayonets at the opening of your school to keep you out because of the color of your skin. Well, notice, he's a Democrat. Eisenhower is a Republican. Eisenhower says, not only are you challenging federal government authority as a state, but you are also challenging my authority as a Republican. Thomas, Democrat, Eisenhower, Republican. And so Eisenhower turns the tables on them. Eisenhower nationalizes the Arkansas National Guard, meaning as commander-in-chief, he takes over the National Guard. And then Eisenhower sends in the 101st Airborne and says, now, instead of keeping black students out, you are going to make sure that they are protected as they come in. Even though Eisenhower's not big on civil rights, he does the right thing here. Can you imagine, outside of Circle High School, there being soldiers trying to keep the peace? Maybe that should happen. This is called the Little Rock Night. They were the 9 students, that black students who integrated Central High School in Little Rock. I give them a big old Ohio State sticker. That takes a lot of courage. They got together every day and walked, and there was these crowds of white people who were protesting, right, as if because they didn't have anything better to do, I suppose. And one day, Elizabeth Eckford, one of the 9, missed the stop, she was late, and she had to walk to school by herself. Imagine that, having to walk to school all by yourself with a crowd of angry white people yelling at you. I don't know what she's saying right here, but I imagine this lady is not saying nice things. So I give that Canadian Michigan sticker. Governor Orville Thomas, he won re-election by saying all sorts of things like the government's coming in and they're being tyrants. He won re-election with like 69% of the popular vote. Crazy. I give them a Michigan sticker out today. Again, bayonets keeping protesters out, soldiers escorting you to class. Crazy stuff. The Southern response was what was called passive resistance. They said, if you're going to make my public school allow blacks in, then we'll just make this public school a private school. And then we'll let in who we want to let in, and kick out who we want to kick out. Some southern states and towns, they just ignored the decision and dared the federal government to do anything about it. Of course, there was violent confrontation. And then there were senators in Congress who said, in something called the Southern Manifesto, I can't think of anything that has ever been written, as they call it, something manifesto that's ever been good. And they said they're going to resist immigration by all lawful means. 90 members of Congress from the South signed this thing. There's the next one. The next one's not on the sheet. It says white citizens councils. The next one should be white citizens councils. And that's pretty much what you would expect it to be. A bunch of white people getting together saying, we don't want immigration. I'm not saying that they all wore hoods. I'm sure. Okay. Michigan sticker. This dude right here, Strom Thurmond. Do you know what a filibuster is? I talked about filibustering. A filibuster is when a senator gets to stand up in front of the Senate and talk a bill to death. And he has the floor as long as he's able to stand and keep talking. He's not allowed to even lean on the podium where his talking stopped. He's not allowed to go to the restroom. This dude, filibustered against the Civil Rights Act of 1964 for over 24 hours. He had to stand there and keep talking and talking and talking. He actually opened up a New York City phone book and just started, New York City phone book, correct? And just started reading from it so he could keep the podium because he ran out of things to say about the Civil Rights Act. Now, the civil rights leaders themselves started seeing that the pace of change was going too slow. They didn't want to wait for the NAACP to go through the court system because the court system takes a long time to get things done. And so, we're going to see in the Montgomery bus boycott and the Greensboro sit-ins, activist leaders like Martin Luther King start to emerge and say, we're not going to just do what the court wants us to do or go through the court process. We're going to non-violently, civilly disobey. Martin Luther King will emerge from what I'm about to tell you about the Montgomery bus boycott to form the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, a civil rights organization. And he is going to urge nonviolent civil disobedience. He is going to be on the nightly news. And he and his fellows are going to be beaten and have dogs sicked on them and arrested and have water cannons sprayed at them. And they're not going to fight back. As Martin Luther King read from Henry David Thoreau about civil disobedience, and Gandhi about civil disobedience, and Jesus said, turn the other cheek when somebody strikes. You strike this cheek, turn to the other cheek. Fight violence with nonviolence, and it's going to get people on their side. So, I give Martin Luther King an Ohio State sticker. Southern Christian Leadership Conference will be is on the Intercourse Exam Curriculum, FYI, Civil Rights Organization. So, in Montgomery, Alabama, instead of waiting for the Montgomery bus system to be desegregated through the courts, the people of Montgomery, Alabama decided to take it into their own hands, the black people. They got Rosa Parks to go onto a bus and sit in the front, and she refused to give up her seat when a white person asked for it. Then she was arrested. The NAACP wanted to go through the court system, but the ministers of the city, including Martin Luther King, said, nope, that's not fast enough. They started a boycott. They boycotted the bus system. In other words, Montgomery, which was majority black, every single black person in the city said, we are not going to take the bus system. This lasted for over a year. And throughout that year, it remained nonviolent, even though Martin Luther King's home was blown up. Not blown up. There was a bomb thrown at it. It didn't kill anybody. But still, the point is that they remained nonviolent. And they literally walked everywhere. To work, to school, to church. And the boycott was successful. After the year of walking everywhere, the Supreme Court said, all right, you guys in Montgomery, you have to integrate the bus systems. No more black sections or white sections. Literally walking everywhere. Now, as a person who walks to school on a daily basis, I can attest that this is giving up a lot, right? How many of you care enough about some cause that you would literally give up riding to school either in your car or in a bus every day through the wind and rain and snow? It sucks. And here they are, they're walking everywhere, even in the rain for an entire year, making it so that the buses are empty to force the city to desegregate. They would often meet in churches, not just to hear about Jesus and sing hymns and all that kind of stuff, but the church for black Southern Blacks was also a cultural institution where they got political rallies going to. I give them a Ohio State sticker. I get Rosa Parks an Ohio State sticker. I give that what they're fighting against, the Michigan sticker. It's spread. There were college students from North Carolina A&T, a traditionally black college, who went to the local Woolworth's lunch counter. Woolworth was like a department store / restaurant. And they sat in the white-only section. Another civil rights organization called CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, had done this during World War II. And they're copying this. And despite being harassed and having milkshakes dumped on their head and insults hurled at them, and even being physically assaulted, the sit-in spread to other cities across the South. And with these movements starting, Congress and the president can't just sit by and do nothing. They have to do something. And so even though Eisenhower wasn't really big on supporting civil rights, there were 2 civil rights laws passed in the last few years of Eisenhower's presidency. Neither one, just trying to get there real quick if you can, neither one was really a big deal that laid the groundwork for a later bigger movement. Thank you for listening to my scratchy voice.